Hey, Adam here from Top Mysteries, and welcome back to the channel. This disappearance we're going to be talking about today is very odd, and I've thought a lot about the best way to present this one, and I've settled on changing the format, because I think doing it this way just does the incident a bit more justice. Before we get into this, I just want to start this by saying there seems to have been a lot of police bashing around this disappearance, and this isn't the place for that. Just try and keep things as constructive as possible is what I'm getting at. So here's what we're going to be looking at. This is Noah Donohoe, and he disappeared on the 21st of June this year under very unusual circumstances. 6 days after his disappearance, his body was found uninjured and completely clothesless in a storm drain close to where he disappeared from. We're going to be exploring this incident day by day as the incident was unfolding, starting from the 24th of June when the press really started to ramp up reporting. All of the information in this video I've collated from a lot of press outlets, and to the best of my knowledge, these are all of the facts surrounding Noah's disappearance until the current time. All of the sources can be found in the description below, and I'll have a notice on the screen somewhere when I'm citing a quote or I am paraphrasing information from the press. And when it's just me talking, that won't be there. And also, it's just worth saying as well that if you feel like I've missed anything, then feel free to leave a comment, and I'll update my pinned comment with any amendments that you feel are necessary. So do check that out just in case. Just a point on that as well, make sure what you're saying is referenced with an actual link or I'm going to have to disregard it. So as said then, we're going to start on the 24th of June when the reporting started to ramp up. So, this is from Belfast Live. Noah started his bike journey in South Belfast and was last seen on Northwood Road in the north of the city. Police believe that he may have suffered a head injury after falling from the bike. And the reason they're saying that right off the bat now is because Noah then exhibited strange behaviour afterwards. Essentially shedding clothing and then somehow managed to travel to and crawl into a storm drain where he then drowned. So Chief Inspector Gavin Kirkpatrick said this: "We believe Noah left his home in South Belfast on Sunday the 21st of June at approximately 5:30 p.m. Noah left his home on his black Apollo mountain bike wearing a black skateboarding helmet, khaki green North Face jacket, grey sweatshorts with an emblem on one leg, a tie-dye blue hoodie, Nike trainers with a bright yellow tick, and carrying a khaki rucksack." I apologise now, by the way, because this isn't my area. I'm not from this area, so if I pronounce place names wrong, then you'll have to forgive me for that. Noah was seen on Ormeau Avenue at 5:45 p.m. on Sunday evening. He is then sighted again on Royal Avenue heading towards York Street a short time after. Noah was then seen on North Queen Street heading towards the Limestone Road at 5:57 p.m. An eyewitness believes they saw a young male matching Noah's description fall off his bike Sunday evening, possibly sustaining a head injury, in the vicinity of North Queen Street / York Street, but we do not know the specific time. We believe Noah got back on the bike, cycling into Northwood Road, where he then abandons all of his clothing, as he is seen a short time later cycling while clothless. We believe Noah then dropped his bike and left the area on foot. There has been no further confirmed sightings of Noah since 8 minutes past 6 p.m. on Sunday. Police officers, supported by air support units, police dogs and our tactical support group, have been searching the area alongside community rescue service colleagues and local volunteers. Noah's family and police are very concerned for Noah, as this is completely out of character. We need help from the public to find him. If you have any information, please contact police immediately on 101, quoting the reference number 1619 of 21 June 2020. So Noah was wearing a helmet when he fell off the bike, and police believe that it sustained a head injury, because at this moment in time, what else makes sense there? This behaviour was only exhibited, of shedding the clothes, was only exhibited after he'd fallen from the bike. So then after he falls from the bike, he gets back up, mounts the bike again, cycles into Northwood Road where he abandons all of his clothing. It's not all at once, it looks like it's been shedded as he's gone further. He then eventually abandons the bike and leaves on foot. However, and there'll be more on this later, but right now we're just progressing day by day so I can share my thoughts at the time and the reporting up to that point, because I think this is an interesting way of doing it. But the post-mortem later showed that there wasn't a head injury. And also, just because I know people are interested about this on this channel, it doesn't appear that the search dogs ever found Noah's scent, which is it is a point of interest. Right, so let's move to the 25th of June then, the following day. And I titled this one, Rumours About Missing Teen Distressing. So, this information is from the BBC, but the premise is that rumours started circulating around this disappearance, because it is very strange, and you can see why rumours would start to speculate, on suspicions of foul play, etc. Obviously, the article doesn't actually mention what the rumours were, but this does seem to show that the public were finding it odd, and then they were just speculating as to what may have happened. So, according to the BBC, Superintendent Clark said this: "It's not entirely clear why Noah travelled to the area where he went missing. He went to school in North Belfast, but at this time I can find no connection between the Northwood area and Noah's knowledge of North Belfast." He then went on to say that police have received a significant amount of dashcam footage. Police have a number of hypotheses as to what may have happened. The one that we are majoring on is that he has in some way suffered a head injury which led him to being disorientated. So obviously Noah hadn't been found at this time, and the BBC then just said the search is still ongoing and specialist teams are still out there. Police officers supported in the air and by police dogs are still out searching, and I think it's worth repeating here that the dogs did not find a scent. So, just as a very brief timeline of what we have so far. Left his home at 5:30. He was then seen passing through Ormure Avenue, Belfast, around 5:45. He crossed through the heart of the city along Royal Avenue and then onto North Street. He then made his way into the north of the city, going along North Queen Street. Eyewitnesses then reported seeing a young man that fit Noah's description falling off his bike in the North Queen Street / York Road area. He was then seen riding his bike after having abandoned the clothing. And then at this point, from what we understand, it appears that 6:10 was the last time he was seen when he got off the bike and continued on foot. Let's go to the next day, the 26th of June. This one's titled, More of Missing Boys' Belongings Found, and this is from the BBC. So, Noah was last seen in areas close to Shaw Road at 11 minutes past 6 p.m, where it looks like they recovered Noah's khaki rucksack containing a Lenovo laptop and a copy of the book 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Superintendent Clark said that the items were now being examined by specialist teams and were found after information was given by a member of the public. There'll be more on that later. At this point, the police were still suspecting that Noah had simply fallen from the bike and had sustained that head injury. And it also seems we can be fairly certain that the items were definitely found near Shaw Road, as that continued to be the main area of searching after that. So Sean McCarry then, he's the head of operations at the Community Research Service, and they'd been assisting the police. So he then said, "I would say to anyone listening anywhere in Belfast, the days have gone past. We need to make sure that we're not just thinking he's in North Belfast or that it's in that particular area. We also have to assume that Noah could have moved into other areas and not know where he is or be confused. So anywhere in Belfast, people keep your eyes open and have a look in your house and garden to see that there's nobody there that shouldn't be there." And obviously, what they're saying there now is consistent with the head injury approach. Sean's telling people to search the properties in case Noah is in that state of confusion and, just entered accidentally. So, thoughts so far then from the information that we have present. Currently, at time of reporting, this will change as we go through, but currently so far, Noah's behaviour does seem to be consistent with a head injury because, the behaviours presented were completely out of the ordinary. At this point, the police weren't sure why Noah was where he was, so what was the purpose of Noah's trip? We know later that he didn't actually suffer a head injury, then that was due to the post-mortem later released. And it just didn't seem to provide any clarity in favour of that hypothesis. So the question needs to become then, what could lead a person to removing all of their clothing, or rather shedding it as they progress, getting on the bike a short distance further, dumping the bike, and then heading into a storm drain where he later drowned? It's also worth mentioning at this stage that I do believe that in this storm drain, the water isn't very deep at all, so it's not like, he was neck high or anything like that. I don't believe it was very deep. I think we're talking like shin, maybe something like that. So a couple of things right off the bat that this could have been then. It could have been a head injury, but that seems to have been ruled out now. So what else could have happened that caused him to shed clothing? Was he too hot? Was he hypothermic? Was there disorientation, confusion, some sort of mental break? It's not clear. But we can say that the weather on that day in Belfast, it had 17 degrees Celsius highs, 12 Celsius lows, and was 14 Celsius average. So it seems to me that at those temperatures, you can rule out both being too hot or suffering from hypothermia. So then you have to ask, well, where did this disorientation or confusion come from? Because Noah being in some sort of dazed or confused state must almost certainly be true here. So why was this the case? You would imagine that if he had sustained that head injury, it would have been clear in the post-mortem. So again, why was Noah confused or suffering from a mental break? It's not clear that he was, by the way. That's speculation. I just want to make that clear. So you have to transform that question then to say, well, could there have been any underlying health issues that were present? And if there were, I haven't come across that information. And it's also worth saying that Noah's family, in particular Noah's mother, she's been very, very open with the press, because even today, at the time of recording, she doesn't have answers. So, if Noah had underlying health conditions or mental health problems or anything like that, I do fully believe that Noah's mother would have told the press, because these kind of things normally come up very early, because, it kind of creates this sense of emergency and we need to find this person right now, early on in the search. So I don't believe there was any underlying health issues. The only other thing I could really think of off the top of my head was perhaps ingesting some kind of substance that may have contributed to that behaviour. But again, there's no evidence of that thus far. And you would imagine that something like that would have come up on the toxicology report, but it doesn't seem to have, at least not that we've been told. And you would imagine if the police wanted to resolve this incident with the public, and to get them to stop speculating and to tell them, I think they would probably make people aware that something came up in the toxicology report, but they didn't. So the question in its simplest form then needs to be, why did Noah end up drowning in a storm drain with what seems to be no injuries present? What could have caused this? So let's go to the 27th of June then, and I've titled this one, Body Found in Search for Missing Teenager. This is from the BBC. A body believed to be that of missing teenager Noah Donohoe was found in a storm drain in North Belfast, police have said. While at this time officials didn't have any official identification, they believed it was Noah, and it did in fact end up being Noah. Superintendent Clark, first of all, he reiterated that he did not believe that foul play had occurred here because, from the scene it didn't appear that there was any third party. And it also seems that rumours of foul play were spreading again, and people in general were finding the whole incident off, and it's obvious why. It's clear why. So in response to that, Clark said, "It's disappointing that I again need to comment about people circulating a number of rumours about Noah's disappearance, which are completely without foundation. This type of commentary and rumour is distressing for Noah's family and is unhelpful." So at this point, the authorities were still of the opinion that Noah may have just fallen from the bike, causing an injury, which caused him to abandon his clothing and head to this location. So this takes us to the 28th of June, and it seems as though the authorities had made some progress now, and that they had figured out where Noah had entered the storm drain, but were still trying to piece together his final movements. This is from the Belfast Telegraph. They stated that as officers continued to scour CCTV footage and troll through data on his laptop, they don't believe there was any foul play involved in Noah's passing, but they are still trying to discover why exactly he entered the underground drains. So just to clarify then, the authorities' thought process, as per reports on the 28th of June, seemed to be that they didn't know why Noah had entered the storm drain, but they seemed to be certain that foul play had not occurred here. They were still heavily leaning into the idea that Noah must have been hurt as a result of the fall from the bike, which caused him to exhibit all of this odd behaviour. So the Belfast Telegraph also collected some more details. They reported that Noah's body was discovered in the pitch-dark storm drain complex in the Shaw Road area yesterday morning, that being the 27th. Local sources said his body was found at around 10:15 in the morning in a network of underground drains close to Shaw Road. The drains cover an area of almost 1 kilometre. So the paper also suggested that while it's not known how the authorities knew where Noah had entered the drain, they'd been examining CCTV in the area and may have caught a glimpse of him nearby or entering. So they also stated, one line of inquiry is believed to be that Noah either entered the storm drain for shelter on the Sunday evening of his disappearance, or that he was concussed and confused following an earlier fall. Superintendent Clark said that the specialist teams that had been deployed into the drains had found it extremely challenging to navigate. He also added that the location that Noah was found was very different from where he entered, and that they were very confident that they knew his precise point of entry. He said, "We did have access to the storm drain complex, and it has been searched over the last number of days before we got to the end of the complex. It's an extremely challenging environment in which to work, and that is why it has taken the length of time to go through that complex. They were working in the pitch black and there was a lot of ground to cover. In my 30 years in the police, this is one of the most unusual missing person inquiries that I have dealt with. An investigation into the circumstances of Noah's disappearance is still continuing, but there is no evidence to suggest foul play." Superintendent Clark then also added that the shorts and the coat belonging to Noah are still missing. And I don't even think they've been found to date, actually. I think they're still missing. So there's obviously a lot to think about at the moment then, and I can see why Clark said that in his 30 years on the job, this is one of the most unusual cases that he's been involved with. It seems to me that because the police stated that they are very confident that they know where Noah entered the storm drain, and they were confident that foul play wasn't involved, I can only imagine that means that they'd seen him alone, near, or entering the drain. I can only imagine that to be the case because otherwise, very confident wouldn't make a lot of sense. It's also worth pointing out that Clark made it clear that someone, in order to get in, would have to have made a proactive effort to do so, meaning that it doesn't appear that it was just as simple as walking in. And why Noah would then make his way right to the very end of this pitch black, kind of tight space, I've no idea. So Belfast Live reported that the community began searching for Noah on the 23rd, but the Irish News stated that it actually started on the 22nd. Which does seem to make some sense actually, because while you can report a person missing before 24 hours, I don't know how much action is taken until that time has lapsed. So let's just take a step back from the storm drain. At 11 minutes past 6 p.m. on the 21st of June, it was reported that Noah was last seen heading towards Northwood Linear Park. This is a densely wooded area. It's very odd that Noah would first strip most or all of his clothing and then head into the woods, or at least towards the area. Though it's at least somewhat understandable if the assumption of a head injury rang true, so I can see why that was the current line of thinking by the authorities. However, as we'll get to soon, the post-mortem would reveal that Noah had not sustained any severe head injury, is the way it read. Which honestly just serves to take this incident into bizarre territory now, because all of a sudden things make less sense. Because if you can say that there was no head injury present, or the way they phrased it, there was no severe head injury, which we later find out means it doesn't look like there was a head injury. Things make less sense, but we've got a little bit further to go before we actually get there. So let's move to the 29th of June now then. I'll be keeping the name of this individual private here, but more information started to be made public concerning Noah's belongings. Thus far, the way it was reported and the way it seemed was that Noah fell off the bike, rode some more, then abandoned the bike along with all of the clothing. However, according to the BBC, Miss K told BBC News that she found Noah's bike at her home on the same road he disappeared from at 8 p.m. that night. The storm drain where Noah's body was found lies behind her garden. Miss K thought the bike had been left by some local boys, she said. I went out and lifted it off the ground because it was just lying at the back of my car. I didn't think any more of it. I thought the parents or the boys would come and get it. When I went to work the next morning, it was still there. I came home and started to look on social media and saw the missing boy. She was then alert to what had happened and she reported the finding of the bike to the authorities. So if you was paying attention to that, the items of clothing wasn't mentioned, so we can only assume that they weren't in her garden. And now it's not completely clear where they were found in relation to the bike. Though I think that we can be fairly certain that they were still discovered around that general area that the bike was located. So, the 30th of June, I titled this one The Final Sighting, and this information comes from the Irish News. Again, I'm going to be keeping the name of this individual private too, but on the 30th of June, a Miss L came forth and spoke to the Irish News. And it appears that she may have been one of the final people to see Noah. I quote, Miss L told how she saw the teenager riding his bike while clothesless past their home in North Belfast. She called for her husband, but by the time he came, Noah was gone and only his bike was seen lying in the street. A CCTV camera owned by Miss L captured this incident, Noah had cycled to a cul-de-sac on the residential street where it is believed he walked behind some of the houses and entered a storm drain. He is thought to have discarded his clothing earlier after falling off his bike and sustaining a head injury, leaving him disorientated. So at this part in the research, I was actually a little bit confused now, because that statement by Miss L seems to be in conflict with the statements made by Miss K. Miss L is suggesting that the bike was lying there in the street, while Miss K stated that she located the bike behind her car. Perhaps I'm just reading into that too much, and maybe I'm just looking a little bit too much into that, and the specifics of the situation are being lost. But those two statements, with no further elaboration or context, don't seem to be gelling very well. The bike, obviously, can't simultaneously be out in the street and behind Miss K's car, right? Unless it was moved, which I doubt. Or again, the specifics have just been lost in the reporting there, and Miss L does quite literally mean that she saw it behind the car on the street, but it just wasn't expressed in the article. Miss K also said that quite a few people saw him, and I believe that she's referring to those present in her living room, but that's not made clear either. I don't really know why some journalists choose to make these things ambiguous. If something very specific happened, where details are important, it shouldn't be left to the reader to fill out the blanks and to use their own interpretation. You know what I mean? I feel like the reporter should spell it out for you, rather than you then getting it wrong and speculating. Or me, actually, in this case, Anyway, this article then states that Miss L then looked out again, but only the bike was on the ground. She said, "It was so quick, it was just a flash going past. By the time I got out to look, he was gone." She also said that Noah, from what she saw, didn't seem to be in any distress. So it's difficult to know what to think about this. On the one hand, you could say, it's kind of weird that no action was taken here. Seeing a young person, or anyone really, for that matter, on a bike in public without clothing, I think that does warrant some kind of action. To see if that person's all right. I don't know. And from what she said, he did seem to disappear pretty quickly, which is odd. Maybe he was just trying to get out of sight quickly. It's not clear. Although, it's weird because if you put yourself in that situation where you're just seeing that unfold, you had no idea this person was about to go missing or anything like that. What would you have done? The answer to that is probably different for everybody. So on the 1st of July then, and this is from the Belfast Telegraph and the Mirror, it looks like the funeral was on the 1st, and I did have a look at some videos of this, and it was actually amazing just to see how many people turned out, and it was nice to see that there was just a lot of support there. It was really nice to see. So apart from Noah's funeral, there wasn't much in the way of updates that day as to what may have happened. But the Belfast Telegraph reported, and I quote, "The initial theory that Noah had fallen off his bike, suffered a head injury, and had been left confused and disorientated turned out to be tragically accurate." I didn't come across any other sources that said that, so I'm not sure what they'd seen or why they were so confident of that, because at this point it's a complete hypothesis, rather than fact. And later on, the post-mortem didn't seem to provide any clarity in favour of that, so I'm not sure why they said that. I think that's pretty damn irresponsible reporting, actually, to just say that as a matter of fact. That's not good. I don't know why they did that. So still on the 1st, the statement also seems to be in contrast a little bit with what was reported by the Mirror, who stated that Superintendent Clark said an investigation into the circumstances of Noah's disappearance is still continuing, but there is no evidence to suggest foul play. So if the superintendent is basically suggesting that no conclusions have been drawn yet, no conclusions have been reached at this point, I'm not really sure what the Belfast Telegraph were doing there at all. So there wasn't much in the way of reporting on the 2nd, but on the 3rd, all I really came across was some amount of scepticism of the reporting thus far. It seems that because of some of the history concerning Northern Ireland that I don't really want to get into in this video, some individuals seem to be suggesting that the idea that foul play was not involved had been announced without merit and too early. There was a Change.org petition circulating demanding justice for Noah, whose goals seem to be to reinvigorate the police to have a look at the possibility of foul play. I'm going to keep all names private, but here was just a couple of reasons given by people for signing up to this petition. There are too many unanswered questions. The unqualified statement before autopsy that no foul play was committed is cause for concern. I, as a parent, am very conscious that we have to be respectful of Noah's mum. I just feel that too many questions remain unanswered, and being a parent myself, I feel it's in the public's interest to know what happened. Language is very important, and I think it's absolutely key to be very specific whenever you're talking about anything like this, okay? And it can be very difficult. It can be very difficult to do that. But the first commenter there stated the unqualified statement before autopsy that no foul play was committed is cause for concern. I actually think that might be a bit unfair here because the authorities, from what I've come across so far, they haven't said that there was no foul play. What they actually said was that they don't believe there was any foul play. The former indicates definitively, while the latter is just suggesting from what they saw, they didn't believe it was the case. It might only be a very subtle difference in phrasing, but it's actually quite drastic in terms of meaning and intent, so I think we've got to be so careful with that. Obviously, I actually have no idea if foul play was involved or not, but I can say that this whole incident was very strange, which Superintendent Clark did agree with. So there were no real updates until the 7th, other than Noah's family asking people to stop speculating online, which you can actually appreciate. The family will have obviously wanted to have their own space and to be able to grieve in peace without all of the messy noise everywhere. Though with that being said, the family themselves at this point may have still felt that there were unanswered questions, because as reported by the BBC, the family of Noah Donohoe is urging anyone with information on his missing clothes or any events surrounding his passing to contact them. And it's obviously worth mentioning here that his green North Face jacket and grey sweatshorts are still missing. And that's actually a very relevant question as well. Where did the missing items end up? So Andrew Murphy from Relatives for Justice said, if people could keep searching for the clothes that have not been found, that would be great, and any CCTV footage is most important. If people could check their dash cams, doorbells that have coverage, business premises CCTV, anything like that, it would all be very useful to have a good timeline of events. I'd never actually heard of Relatives for Justice before, and they seem to provide support to those who need help negotiate through various legal and investigative mechanisms dealing with their loss. It also looks like they provide therapeutic support, counselling, and just things of that nature. So Andrew also added, how Noah got into that storm drain is a question that is unanswered. It is an area that is quite difficult to get access to, so that is of particular concern. At the end of the article, the BBC added, on Tuesday, police said results from a post-mortem examination had been shared with Noah's family, and that an investigation into the circumstances of his disappearance is continuing. So at this point, there wasn't actually that much being reported on now up until the 17th of July, so 10 days after the last update. And it was on the 17th when the findings of the post-mortem were released. In addition to that, other details were starting to be revealed about the nature of Noah's trip. Initially, the authorities weren't sure why Noah had made the trip in the first place, but according to the BBC, Noah was travelling to Cave Hill Country Park to meet friends on the day of his disappearance. According to the Irish News, Noah was doing work towards his Duke of Edinburgh award on the day he went missing, and it is believed he brought his laptop to gain extra credits during his time off school. Noah's phone and laptop were also recovered by police, and the family are keen to have these returned to them. They have not been told if the authorities have examined the phone's GPS. The family believe that the phone's mapping system may have information on the final movements of the teenager. Now, according to the Irish Times, the post-mortem had revealed that Noah had passed away as a result of drowning. There's some interesting wording now. While travelling across the city, he fell off his bike and may have hit his head. He was then seen discarding his clothes and then continuing on the bike, an action his family said was completely out of character. This led to speculation that he may have suffered a head injury that could have been a factor in entering the storm drain where his body was eventually found. Andrew Murphy from Relatives for Justice said the post-mortem found the cause of passing, and it's also revealed that he did not sustain a severe head injury. So Andrew specifically stated a severe head injury. Does that mean that there was a minor injury present or none at all? That should have been made completely clear. You can't on the one hand tell people to stop speculating and then leave things completely open to speculation. However, even so, that finding throws a spanner in the works of the leading hypothesis. So the question still needs to be, what could lead someone to remove their clothing and then to head into a storm drain? As mentioned earlier, if the weather causing hypothermia can be ruled out and the head injury hypothesis is now in trouble, then we need to be looking elsewhere. I fully agree that Noah must have been confused and completely disorientated for some reason, but why? Perhaps this mental state was also the cause for falling off the bike rather than the other way around. Of course, that completely relies on the idea that Noah had not sustained a head injury serious enough to have caused this. So this is not my area of expertise at all, but the question does need to be posed. Could he have been suffering from some sort of nervous breakdown? That then does raise many questions as to why that might have been the case. Symptoms of a nervous breakdown include a loss of hope and just generally not great thoughts. There's also anxiety, insomnia, hallucinations, mood swings, panic attacks, paranoia, among others. Though typically, and from what I understand, a nervous breakdown normally causes a person to become a bit more reclusive. They'll avoid meeting people and just generally isolating themselves, rather than what happened to Noah. A psychotic break, on the other hand, seems to be when a nervous breakdown gets really bad and triggers psychosis. So there's three main symptoms for this: hallucinations, delusions, and confused thoughts. Hallucinations of this nature can be presented in a number of different forms. So you might see something that isn't there. People who go through these kinds of breaks report hearing voices when in this kind of state. Some even experience a smell or taste or touch despite there being no source for that. Becoming delusional would mean that despite it being self-evidently being untrue, you've gained some sort of unwavering belief in that very untruth. So you might suddenly believe that someone is trying to get you or something like that and then act accordingly, even though that's not the case at all. While studying at uni, psychosis did come up a number of times in my course. And I'm not well versed on this subject or anything like that, but from what I understood at the time, the current research indicates that dopamine plays a major role in this. So just think of it as a chemical in the brain that the brain uses to transmit information between cells. Experts in the field are saying that if there's a disruption in this process, it could result in this kind of breakdown. Now, in all fairness, I'm not saying that this did happen to Noah because I obviously don't know, but it's worth exploring various avenues. There's other problems with that, by the way. I couldn't even begin to tell you how that may have happened. Again, as far as I'm aware, Noah didn't seem to have any underlying health conditions because, again, those things are normally made public early on during the search, because it's something the searchers need to know about. So it seems to me that pre-existing psychological causes can be ruled out. They say that substance abuse can cause a break like this, but typically I think it's stronger substances that do that. And I would have imagined that there would have been evidence present of that, in like the toxicology report or something like that. So I'm a little bit doubtful on that one. I'm not really sure what else could have caused it, maybe some sort of sensory overload, though I wouldn't have thought that would have led to a person drowning. But if a head injury isn't the explanation, then I'm not sure how that happened at all. If a nervous breakdown or a psychotic break isn't what happened either, and the authorities are certain that foul play wasn't involved, then I can absolutely see why there's a lot of confusion here. And it's hard to know where to go from there as well, actually. So the next update then is on July the 18th, and I've titled this No Head Injury. This day actually brought about a piece of significant information. The Irish News reported that an MP for North Belfast, John Finucane, I apologise if I've butchered that, probably have, but John said that Noah had not suffered a head injury, despite a theory put forward by the police that he may have suffered a concussion after the fall. So it seems to me then that hypothesis can be put to rest. At first, all I could really find was articles stating that he hadn't sustained a severe head injury, which isn't specific enough. But now, according to the MP, it looks like he hadn't sustained a head injury at all, period. Which now means that this young man removed all of his clothing, ditched it all, and then was found in a storm drain 6 days later, uninjured, and we have absolutely no explanation as to what happened. Just let that sink in for a minute. The Irish News also revealed some further details, and they said the green backpack contained his Lenovo laptop and was recovered several days after the disappearance. Police said that it was recovered following information from a member of the public. The family were told that it was to be examined by forensic experts, but they have not been given any details since, nor have they been given any further details about its recovery. I'm not really sure why the family weren't given that information. I think we'd all agree that Noah's loved ones, they have the right to know everything here. So there was nothing of note that I could find on the 19th, but on the 20th, the Irish News reported this. More than 4 weeks after 14-year-old Noah Donohoe went missing in North Belfast, it is alarming that so many aspects of his passing remain unexplained. Noah's body was found in a storm drain in the Shaw Road area of the city on June 27, 6 days after he disappeared while cycling in the area. And police said at the time they did not believe foul play was involved. However, suggestions that Noah sustained a concussion after reportedly falling from his bike, causing him to remove his clothing and suddenly entering the storm drain, were always difficult to understand. As the Irish News revealed last Friday, a post-mortem found that Noah had drowned, but his family has not been able to confirm that the teenager suffered a head injury prior to his passing. And I actually like and agree with this next part. The public is entitled to expect that the missing elements of this story of Noah Donohoe can be clarified and the requests made by his grieving family addressed as soon as possible. I completely agree with that statement. What I will say is this. There seems to be a lot of information coming up to suggest that Noah hadn't sustained a head injury at all, which I think is pretty clear at this point. Let's be absolutely realistic. If Noah had obvious head trauma, that would have been pushed aggressively as the explanation by the authorities. Because at the end of the day, having something that looks like it can't be explained away reasonably and adequately is just not a good look. As someone that's scoured through newspapers of hundreds of disappearance cases now, what I can tell you is that the authorities like to conclude things as fast as possible. Because when you have a situation like this, it can cause panic and just an uncertainty which isn't good in general, for public order. The more I'm reading about this, just the stranger it seems to get, and it's very difficult to understand in a rational manner why Noah removed all of the clothing, including his shoes, and then later entered and made his way through the entirety of a storm drain in absolute darkness. It's very unsettling, and it does bother me. What could have caused him to do that? So on the 23rd of July, Noah's mother released a statement, and it was just clear that this was really tearing them up. I can't imagine something like this happening and then not having any answers at all as to what's gone on. So this was the statement. As reported in media last week, the preliminary findings of the autopsy are that Noah passed away as a result of drowning and that he did not suffer a severe head injury. Which makes sense, he was wearing a helmet, I know that's not absolutely foolproof, but it makes it unlikely that you're going to sustain a massive head injury, from falling off the bike. It then reads, "It is the family's hope that the inquest will assist in answering the outstanding questions of how Noah was in a state of undress and how he came to pass away in a storm drain." So we're on the 9th of August at this point, and I titled this one Frustration. It seemed that there was what can only be described as like a media blackout. There was nothing else that I could find on Noah being reported from, from the 23rd up until the 9th. However, Noah's mother actually said something very interesting on Facebook. She said, "Why do we not all wake up? My son is gone. We have no answer. We have nothing. Please start questioning why I have no answers. Let's work together. Please simply ask why." It's a great question, and it's one that needs to be answered. By the way, still at this time, on the 9th of August, the family was still waiting on the return of the laptop and phone, nor had they seen the CCTV footage. I can't even believe that that's the situation at this point, but that is where they were on the 9th of August. So the next update was on the 12th of August, and I titled this one Further Frustration. Because you can literally just feel the frustration on behalf of Noah's loved ones here. And yet again, his mother issued another appeal to the public, asking for information. Northern Ireland's Deputy First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, threw her support behind Noah's family and stated, "I have met with Noah's mother and her legal team, and have told them I will leave no stone unturned to help them find the truth. Understandably, people are now looking for answers around the circumstances which surrounded Noah's passing. In particular, the role of the authorities in investigating Noah's disappearance and passing has been questioned by some. All families are entitled to know the truth surrounding the passing of their loved ones, and this must be the case for the family of Noah Donohoe." I could not agree more, and I couldn't have said it better. She then said, "I fully support the Donohoe family in their search for the truth about the passing of Noah. I will not rest until she has all the answers surrounding the loss of her son. Noah's memory deserves nothing less." So 6 days later, on the 18th of August, Noah's family just didn't seem to think that they were getting anywhere with this, and it seems to me that the family may have been highly dissatisfied with the authorities because they started up social media accounts to draw attention to what was happening on their own. The Irish Republican News reported this. Noah went missing in North Belfast on the evening of Sunday, June 21st, while cycling to meet friends for a youth project. 6 days after he disappeared, his body was found in a storm drain near an area where loyalists have been hostile to nationalist young persons. At the time of his disappearance, the authorities proposed a hypothesis that Noah had suffered a change of personality after hitting his head while cycling, causing him to suddenly scatter his possessions and clothing in a variety of locations. Following the discovery of his unclothed body, authorities continued to insist that no foul play was involved. 7 weeks later, the police have withdrawn their personality change theory but have provided little further information. The paper then goes on to clarify that the family still had not seen the CCTV footage, nor had the laptop or phone been returned. Right, so it seems now then at this stage, if we haven't already, we can finally rule out the head injury hypothesis, because that appears to have just come to an impasse. So the rumours that the press were talking about seem to be linked to foul play in regards to the loyalists doing this in Northern Ireland. I do want to be clear though that at this time there doesn't seem to be any evidence in favour of that hypothesis. From what we know so far of Noah's discovery, it doesn't appear that a struggle had taken place because the authorities have consistently maintained that there is no evidence in favour of that. Which, as I said before, just leaves us with a bizarre set of circumstances. Also, while it's clear that this was the case anyway, it hadn't been explicitly said before, Noah hadn't just removed his clothing, but he actually scattered them. This actually reminds me in some ways of the disappearance of Gaia Pope from Swanage. Not necessarily in terms of the actual circumstances, barring a few, but the circumstances behind her disappearance were equally as odd. The authorities found her scattered clothing on a coastal path and then 2 days later found her uninjured body not too far away from the clothing. There was a lot of speculation about foul play in that case as well, because otherwise it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense, which obviously is the case here too. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to have a look at my video on that. But back to Noah though. On the 21st of August, I titled this one, Where? The BBC managed to get a hold of some CCTV footage that shows Noah cycling, though they only seem to have released this image rather than the footage itself. The BBC also added some interesting information. According to police, the last confirmed sighting of Noah was 11 minutes past 6, close to the storm drain at the back of Northwood Road in North Belfast. While the CCTV timings suggest it took him 10 minutes to make the final leg of his journey, the distance can be made on a bike in 2.5 minutes. It's not known what he was doing for the remainder of that time. We'll find later on that this didn't appear to be the case, and we'll find that the time on the CCTV camera was actually wrong, according to the authorities. But at this current time, nobody knows that. So the coroner said, and I'm assuming this is based on CCTV footage along with eyewitness testimony, but he said that Noah wasn't seen interacting with anyone else at any of the sightings. And just to be clear, there was never any mention of it looking like Noah was being chased or anything like that. So honestly, what happened here? Now, the Republican Irish News, along with many other just individuals, became quite sceptical and critical of the authorities. And they started to ask some very hard questions as well. This is what they had to say. The police took 6 days to find Noah, yet they told the public no thanks for their help. A past weather chart for Belfast on timeanddate.com shows a very dry week before the weekend of his recovery, yet authorities claimed inability to completely search the storm drain where he was eventually found because of flooding. They were searching so feverishly, yet were available enough to offer to search anybody's premises who requested it. They continued to declare no foul play, which we often saw as a cop-out from making the search a more critical operation. Did they search any houses? What was the difficulty that prevented them from entering a storm drain which a teenager was deemed to waltz into? Then they ask, was there really no foul play? They state, we desperately want the answer to be no foul play, but though this verdict is being ran with, it seems more like a convenient conclusion rather than a realistic one. The explanation of his final moment never washed. Based on a couple vague to sketchy sightings, the police flocked to the bizarre hypothesis that he fell off the bike, hit his head and pretty much lost his mind. Thus led him to shed clothing and abandon his bike and leave the area of his last sighting on foot. I'd argue that's even stranger than that as well, because he didn't just, He didn't just shed and abandon the clothing, it seems to have been scattered around as well. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what that means in terms of explaining what happened, but it is vital we keep that in mind. It's not like, it doesn't appear that there was just one pile with all of the clothing. But they continue, causing further concern was the non-transparency during the search and in the aftermath. The police refused to divulge the following: information about a strange phone call leading to the recovery of key belongings, location of his mobile phone's recovery, how he entered the storm drain, and where he was found, a point they claimed to know, and the local police force's attitude towards the public's compassion in searching for the teen was in contrast to other missing person cases. Normally, police encourage and work with the public, whereas this time, the public's assistance was dissuaded very early on. First, they encouraged the public to stick to searching their own premises, then requested all public searches to cease. A high percentage of police briefs was devoted to criticising internet rumour spreading, which seems a natural outcome with the lack of a realistic explanation given by authorities. But they demanded their puzzling explanation to be the only explanation. In fairness, there were some good points there, and it's not clear to me why the public's assistance was being dissuaded in this instance. Let's be reasonable though. Before we got the post-mortem, the official hypothesis of a head injury was a reasonable suggestion. After the post-mortem, yeah, absolutely not. However, it is worth pointing out, as we mentioned earlier, the authorities did seem to drop that as their official stance. Though from what I've come across, they never gave any further hypotheses, whilst at the same time asking the public to stop speculating. That is just not how human nature and curiosity works, We're very curious, and if they wanted the public to stop talking about their own various hypotheses, they should have provided something more tangible, Or have just been completely honest and said that they don't know yet. The questions are piling up now though. Why did Noah remove clothing and why did he fall from the bike? I now don't believe that the fall resulted in the strange behaviour, but rather the fall was a part of the strange behaviour. So what caused that? What caused Noah to start exhibiting this odd behaviour in the first place? Why did he enter the storm drain? Why did it take police 6 days to locate him? If the authorities are so confident that foul play was not a factor at all, then why are they being so quiet in terms of releasing information? You'd think at the least the family would be brought up to speed. I could completely understand the secrecy if there was suspicion of foul play, but as they have made plainly clear, that suspicion just isn't there. It's odd. So on the 23rd of August now, and unfortunately I don't have full access to this article because they've put it under premium only, which means you'd need a subscription to access it, which isn't so great given the subject, let's be honest. But anyway, according to the Belfast Telegraph, Noah's rucksack was discovered by a previously convicted robber who then tried to sell the laptop inside. The man didn't know to whom it once belonged and apparently cried when the police caught up with him. It was this man that led the police to where he found the items. He then made a witness statement and was never considered a suspect. That might actually make a bit more sense then as to why the authorities didn't want to release that information to the public, who were already speculating and on edge. Because to learn that a convicted robber found the rucksack, you can just imagine how that would have stirred the pot, so to speak. So, this next update comes on the 28th, and I've titled this one, No Evidence of Attack. So, the BBC and the Irish Times reported that a Belfast court had now examined the disappearance and passing of Noah, and determined that there was no evidence that there was a struggle or any third-party involvement. The coroner, who was obviously well aware that this incident was by no means adequately explained at all, stated that the investigations are continuing. The family finally got to see some, or all, it's not clear, of the CCTV footage and had seen 9 minutes worth of Noah's final movements. It's interesting, and we already know this to some extent, but the court acknowledged that there were blind spots in the footage. Particularly of interest at the time, before they knew that the time was actually wrong, the final leg of the journey from Skegnall Avenue to his final destination was being called into question. So this was the 10 minutes where they just didn't know where he was during a trip and distance that should have taken around 2.5 minutes. But as we said, we later found out that the CCTV camera was wrong, or at least that's what the authorities are saying. So we were also given a better idea as to what time certain items of clothing had been discarded. This is from the BBC. It was established that the teenager left his home on his bike at 41 minutes past 5 on the 21st of June. Previously, if you remember, we thought that had been at 5:30. 53 minutes past 5, he was last seen carrying his bag containing a laptop and books travelling alongside the Art College near the corner of York Street and Frederick Street. Subsequent footage shows Noah travelling towards York Gate, by which stage Noah is clearly seen to be no longer carrying his bag. It's worth mentioning here that at 10 minutes to 5, so 3 minutes previously, he still had everything. Noah then cycled along York Street, crossing Great Patrick Street and the motorway before turning left into Bruffham Street and then right along North Queen Street at 3 to 6. The teenager's phone was found by a member of the public close to a park at North Queen Street. So Noah ditched the phone around 4 minutes after ditching the rucksack. At 6 p.m, Noah is seen cycling towards the Grove Wellbeing Centre. At this point, close to the junction with the Shaw Road, Noah fell from his bike. The court heard a motorist stopped to assist Noah, but he got back on the bike. 1 minute later, he continued along the Shaw Road without his green overcoat. This item of clothing has not been recovered. Noah was seen entering Northwood Crescent from Skegnall Avenue 1 minute later. He was wearing a black cycling helmet, a blue hoodie, grey shorts and black trainers. His helmet was found by a member of the public on Northwood Road, while some of his remaining clothes were discovered by a member of the public lying on a wall further along the same road. At 3 minutes past 6, Noah is seen a short distance away. The teenager is then seen on CCTV going between two houses, which leads to an area of waste ground behind the houses. The next hearing is scheduled for early November. So it looks like Noah removed everything else within the span of a couple of minutes. That is just bizarre. What was the cause of this behaviour? Stepping away from the BBC, the Irish Times then gave some more information about the storm drain. A specific address is mentioned that I will keep private. The coroner stated, "To me, it seems likely that Noah entered the storm drain to the rear of a particular house by lifting a metal drain cover, which at that time was not secured. I have examined the drain cover, as have police officers, and it seems entirely possible for Noah to have been able to lift that cover and enter the drain system at that location." Noah's body was found by specially trained police officers between two drain access points within a section of the tunnel running under the Translink access road. The environment within the drain system can be described as challenging, with the drain system backfilling with water during intervals between low and high tides. I consider that, based upon all of the evidence before me at this stage, and the evidence includes extensive CCTV footage and witness statements, that Noah acted alone when he travelled to the Northwood Road and entered the drain system. Investigations, however, are ongoing, and I have reassured the family this morning that further evidence will be assessed as it is received. There is no evidence at present to suggest that any other person was involved in Noah's disappearance and passing. It looks then, to me, like the authorities have no real understanding of what happened. I think that they know that this was odd, and they just don't really know what to do with it. So on the 10th of September now, we're coming towards the end of everything we know so far. The BBC, all of this information came from the BBC. So we learned on the 10th that the storm drain Noah was found in had been inspected the previous week, but had an access hatch that remained unlocked. Experts have obviously said that the hatch should always be locked at all times. So that begs the question, was it just a mistake? I can only assume it was. The padlock was only placed on it after Noah's discovery. The authorities also stated that the time of one of the CCTVs was wrong. The final CCTV showed him at 11 minutes past 6, but authorities declared that the actual time should have read 3 minutes past 6, meaning that there was no time to be accounted for. At first we thought he'd spent 8 minutes somewhere, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The time was just wrong. So you can infer from that no one else interfered with his journey. The authorities also clarified that there was no one chasing him either. So, I suppose we'll be waiting for that second court hearing in early November, and then there will be the full inquest on the 18th of January. I'll keep an eye out for them, and we'll see if there's any further information to be known. I have just found as well, just looking briefly now, because it's the 14th of September today. At this time, there's no new updates today. But yesterday, I found this by the Belfast Telegraph, whose link I will just copy now so I have the reference. This is what was reported. The grieving mother of schoolboy Noah Donohoe said yesterday she is still seeking answers about how her son passed away in June this year. Posting on social media, She said she still did not know how St Malachi's college pupil Noah knew of the existence of the storm drain in North Belfast in which his body was found, nor why he had discarded his clothes during his trip across the city. She tweeted yesterday, "Until factual evidence is found to say my Noah knew of that storm drain on Northwood Road, I will keep asking for answers. Until factual evidence is found how my Noah came to be in a state of undress, I will keep asking for answers." I mean, I don't even know how to conclude this, to be honest, but I genuinely don't think that the authorities have any idea what happened to Noah. You know, again, I think that they know this was weird, and I think they're having a very hard time explaining what happened. You know, this is one of those disappearances, and we've covered a fair few on the channel now, where it's just very difficult to explain without involving foul play, despite there being no evidence at all of that. There's no real way to conclude this now, other than saying that this is all of the information, as far as I'm aware, this is all of the facts surrounding this disappearance. If I've missed anything, or if you think I've missed something, then please do leave it in the comments below. Please do make sure it's sourced though, or it's going to have to be disregarded. But if you do source it and you leave a nice link there, I'll add it to the pinned comment as an amendment. I mean, other than that though, thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. And let's just hope that Noah's family are able to, hopefully they're able to receive answers and get some closure here. But other than that, cheers, and I'll see you next time.